this is Darcy with River Wranglers. I wanted to give you a quick overview of our virtual 2020 programming. We are usually doing work days on the ground where we're bringing high school students and elementary students together and spending a day educating and doing a work project at the river. Obviously, we can't do that anymore, so we've sort of split the work from the education. The education went to this online platform. We tried to make it as interactive as possible, tried to bring our activities that we do on the ground into this virtual classroom. And then we're having separate, smaller work days, kind of family style work days throughout the watershed to get that work done. So this is the educational piece geared towards fourth and fifth graders. Our goal with this was to make teachers' lives easier. Last spring and fall, all we heard was how overwhelmed teachers were, and we wanted to create something that enriched their teaching, was fun for the kids, as interactive as you can be online was our goal. We wanted to leave the grading style up to the teachers. However they wanted to grade things, they could, so we didn't lock that in here. Teachers can do one lesson a week, or they can do the entire thing in a week. It's totally up to them. And it is also geared towards a student being able to do this independently at home, alone, on their own, completely, all the way to the teacher doing the whole thing together as a class, as a group, and anything in between, because we had obviously no idea what was going to happen with schools and in-person versus virtual. So we wanted to make sure that this worked for every possible scenario we could come up with. And last but not least, we wanted it to be aligned with standards. We provided a standards document. We tried to hit as many things as we could. Obviously, in terms of subjects, we hit science, but we also got in some math, writing, reading, and social studies into this virtual curriculum so they can touch on all of those things. So this is a teacher's view of the class. The student's view is a little less cluttery, but I wanted to show you what we did. So we started with a pretest. We always do that, even in normal times when we're on the ground. We have a pretest that asks the students what they know about non-point and point source pollution and the definition of the word watershed. And then we collect that data again at the end. We also wanted some data on what vocabulary words they were familiar with. So again, this isn't graded. This is just our data. So we asked them a whole bunch of words and if they're familiar with them or not. Then our pollution solution module. We started with a basic video about point and non-source point pollution and what those things are, and then had a real quick answer sheet to go with that. Then we delved more into non-point source pollution and videotaped an activity that we would normally do on the ground that goes into the different types of non-point source pollution. And then for kids who learn better reading, we put that into a reading sheet with some information. And then the activity, which again they would do on the ground, is categorizing things. So they have a bunch of things, germs, dirt. They have to put it into the right category. We made it as interactive as possible, so if they pop this into the wrong category, some feedback will come up, or if it's something like cow poop that could go in multiple categories, nutrients, pathogens, maybe some toxic chemicals, giving them feedback about which one might be a better choice, so that it could be a little interactive, and we tried to make it visually appealing to the kids as well. Then our math activity, this is a taking out the trash in 1960 versus 2020 and how much it's changed and how much in terms of volume. So they get to use a lot of math operations and calculate, again, up to standards with going up to a very large number and bringing it down to a smaller number and comparing those. And it ends with, an awareness of how much trash they're producing and what can you do about it? What can your classroom do about it? What can your school do about it? What can you do in your community? So tying it back to them and their activities. With these math things, they build on each other, and we did not want a kid to get the first answer wrong and then get the rest of them wrong because that first answer was wrong. So we built in feedback as they're going through. So if they get a wrong answer, it'll come back with, hey, try again. Here's a formula to use, and guides them so that they have that positive feedback and get through the activity or exercise. We ended this with a basic carbon footprint activity where you calculate your own impact and it gives you a score and tells you what you can do to make your score better. Then we had an article from the RGJ from last spring about the health of the Carson River. That was a great article. We popped that in there. We created our own written document about what's going on in the Carson River so that there's lots of reinforcement between the two, and then have a more paragraph-oriented write-it exercise about what do they want to see for the future of the Carson River, and what do they care about, and what can they do to help the watershed and the health of the watershed. Ended this module with an upcycle activity, basic, take something out of your recycler trash, upcycle it, make something to upcycle it, and show your class on the next Zoom call kind of thing. Then the watershed unit, again, we started with a basic video about a watershed, a couple of questions. Then we took the video that CWSD, the I Am a Carson River Watershed video, showed them that, and then tied this into the interactive map that's online at CWSD and created this activity around it. So they have to go into that map, it tells them where to go, then they have to answer some questions. So it's the same kind of thing we would do on the ground with laying out a plastic river and they're finding locations along it and placing things. It's just now online. Ended that with a map making activity of their own. Again, this was coming from standards, making a map of their own neighborhood and how to do that. Then we did a freshwater and river flow calculation. So we started with a video of that activity where you start with a 5-gallon bucket of water that represents all the water on Earth. And by the end, you have a dropper full of fresh water that's drinkable. So then we had a write-it activity about their awareness about what can they do to increase the health of the water and limit their consumption. And then another math activity on river flow. We wanted to address the First Nations people in the area because that's such an important part of the history. So we went into this origin of the Great Basin people's story, which has to do with a coyote and a basket of people that he couldn't resist looking in because he's so mischievous, and the people escaped and became the 4 tribes that are in the Great Basin region. We thought that was a good way to fit in, again, to the Great Basin watershed, and then have a basic story analysis that, again, is part of standards, plot, characters, that kind of thing. We did a similar thing with Kit Carson because you can't talk about the Carson River without talking about Kit Carson, so information about him and a Q&A, and ended with a crumpled paper watershed activity. We wanted to give them something, an activity to do at home or together as a group, but that they could do at home without any supplemental materials, with materials that every kid should have at home. And last but not least, at the end, we went and again did that vocabulary check to check the data from before to after, post-test, and the standards documents for teachers. So the second piece of our virtual 2020 curriculum is the hands-on piece that we still just so desperately wanted to get to the kids. So any classes that are participating in the online get a supply of these River Wranglers backpacks. We usually give out t-shirts on the work days, but obviously that's not going to work anymore. So we're using these backpacks and we're filling them with all kinds of treats, starting with a bunch of flyers from museums within the watershed, some school supplies, maps. We have the Carson River Watershed map from CWSD that's so lovely and interactive, stickers, pins, things like that. But we also have some activities that kind of go along with the activities in the online part of the curriculum. These backpacks were designed to be independent of that, but related to it. So the kids can do them separately after the curriculum is done, or they can, again, incorporate it and make it part of the virtual curriculum if they want. So we also have the flood awareness workbook, Weed Busters, Project Wet, Discover the Waters of Nevada, and then these journals that we made. We always do journals with our work days. And we have a bunch of activities, and the things go along with what's in the bag. So this is our non-point source pollution bracelet that again reinforces what they learned on the videos and in the online curriculum about non-point and the different types and what they can do about it. And then they're supposed to make a bracelet. Each bead represents the color of the specific type of non-point source pollution, and then they're supposed to tell somebody about it. We also included information about state parks. This is our filter it activity, which is about how a wetland acts like a filter, and they learn about different types of filter and how they help with pollution. We have things about animals and tracks. Carson River in a bag was something we put together for a sensory experience. We have feathers and leaves and rocks and shells and all kinds of things that you can find at the river that they can then explore in a sensory activity. These are basically workbooks. Our other activities, we have Plant It. We got seeds from Comstock Seed, and they can plant some local wildflowers. We have a pH test and things like that, and everything is again in the workbook. It's all related. We have the Carson River Watershed map and reinforcing those words that they learned on the map online about things like confluence and headwaters and things that they have to mark. We go back into the tribal groups along the Carson River, which we did in the virtual. Leave no trace. Again, state park. A scavenger hunt outdoors, which is specific to River Fork Ranch, but can be used anywhere. The pH test and all about that and why we care about water quality and things like that. And finally ending with a list of local things they can do within the watershed. So again, reinforcing everything that we did in the online curriculum, but still independent enough of it that a teacher can just hand this backpack to students. They can take them home and do whatever they want with them, or they can incorporate them into the online activities.